with us today is Elisha Celeste. Did I pronounce that right?
Celeste.
Celeste.
Yeah.
Okay, great. Thank you. So she is the founder of a method called kinetics. Yeah, is that right?
That's correct. Yeah.
That combines partner fascia release, pain psychology coaching, and experiential learning to demystify pain, regenerate the body, and free the psyche. Elisha's mission is to shift us out of the fear-based paradigm of fear and quick fixes to one of courage and trust. That pain is here to help us become more conscious and earn superhuman powers. So that's a lovely way to introduce your work. And as we get into the deeper details of what you do, which is super interesting in working around the body, I would love to ask you how you came into this topic and why did you end up here? Because I know lots of people who work with trauma, we end up here for some weird reason, or not more than weird, interesting reason. So what's the story?
Yeah, well, like a lot of people, I was on my own search. You know, I had a lot of physical pain. I was in pain pretty much daily from age 12, 13 to, onwards. So my teens and my 20s were full of systemic tension, anxiety, gut pain. My knees ended up hurting so bad I had to stop running and hiking for a long time. And those were two of my favorite activities. So I stopped hiking, I think, in 2002 because I was afraid it would stop me. I stopped running in 2002. I was afraid it would stop me from hiking, which I couldn't bear the thought of not being able to go out and hike. It was like the one place where I felt connected to something bigger than me, where I felt a little bit at peace, where I felt a little bit of freedom and could basically escape the things I was trying to pretend hadn't happened to me. And then my knees got so bad I had to stop hiking. So I let pain and fear shrink my world. I stopped running. I didn't try to fix it. So what I've, learned since is we typically relate to pain the way we learned in childhood. And how I learned to relate to pain was you endure it. You don't tell anyone. You don't try to fix it. You don't try to heal it. You just stuff it down. You pretend you're fine until you literally can't pretend you're fine anymore. And then you just stop whatever it is that's causing the pain and you shrink your world. And so I shrunk my world to the extent that I was working out in a gym, even though I didn't like being indoors inside of a gym. I'd much rather be outside. And from 24 to 31, I started working on the emotional side of things because I ended up writing in a journal in 2004. I am utterly traumatized. And noticed something really interesting. I noticed that uttering those words, which I'd been avoiding for a long time, in 2004, we didn't even have YouTube yet. There wasn't Facebook. There wasn't, there weren't people talking about this everywhere. And actually the word trauma really wasn't even in my environment. No one was talking about it. My family certainly wasn't talking about it. My friends weren't talking about it. I'm not even sure where I heard the word trauma, to be honest. But I wrote it in my journal and then I noticed my entire body relaxed. And that was a really interesting observation. And I was like, what else do I need to be honest with myself about? Because I like this relaxation, even though this is scary to admit that I'm traumatized and I don't even know what to do about it. I like that I relaxed when I said that. So I journaled for a long time, for 2.5 years, cried a lot, yelled in my car, confronted certain people. So I went on a trauma healing journey first from 24 to 31, but I still was left with digestive issues, anxiety, jaw pain. This knee pain was the thing that haunted me the most. So running and hiking represented freedom to me, like just the freedom to be me, the freedom to do what I want, freedom, the feeling of floating over a trail outside in the wilderness, surrounded by beauty. And so I went on a quest to figure out how in the heck can I get to running and hiking again. And along the way, of course, I was like, I gotta, figure out what I want to be when I grow up. That thing, and do something to pay the bills. So I ended up going to, first I did a health coaching certification, and that didn't quite feel like the right fit for me. And then I ended up in massage school in 2008 and was introduced to a method of stepping on people called Rossiter. And the very first time I was stepped on, I knew instantly everything's going to be okay. I'm going to hike and run again. And not only that, this feeling of being haunted by something I couldn't name or really touch or see inside of me. Like I just knew I would find peace. I knew I would find happiness and joy. I had no idea how I knew that at the time. It was just a knowing. But looking back, I would say what happened is, this is how I've kind of come to realize some of us dissociate during traumatic events and actually leave the body. And some of us actually go further in. We retreat deeper inside the body. And this is not something I've heard anyone else talk about. Every time I hear trauma therapists talking about dissociation, I feel left out. And I feel like there are a whole bunch of us that are left out of that description of dissociation because some of us actually retreat deeper in. We feel safer in our bodies. We feel safer inside. And then we literally can build armor, protective armor. This is something I've learned, of course, since then. But fascia actually responds to fear. And you can ask me about fascia in a moment. It's just a connective tissue, a soft tissue, by thickening. It literally thickens and creates this wall of protection we can hide behind. And so I needed to be drawn out of my body. Really, if I'm being honest, with a level of intensity that matched the traumatic events I went through. So being stepped on is really intense. But for those of us that retreated in, it actually feels so good because we're contacting the part of us that is deep, deep, deep in there. And it feels really good to contact that part of us again. So that's kind of how I stumbled into the world of fascia. And that was in 2008. But unfortunately, my teachers at the time, the teachers of this method called Rossiter, it was a pinning and stretching method. It's very different from what I do now, although it looks very similar. They couldn't help me run or hike again. I knew that this fascia thing, this stepping on thing could help me. It was just a knowing, but they weren't able to help me. But I didn't give up. And in 2011, I asked my best friend, Jess, if she would step on me. And we moved to Colorado together, and I could not live in Colorado and not hike and run. She said yes. And within literally 6 weeks, I was running and hiking again. Nothing in my body hurt. I felt so free. I was running Colorado trails at elevation, downhill, no problem. And at the same time, I kind of realized I was doing the work differently. So what kinetics is it's a compression and shearing method. We're actually hunting out the fascial adhesions and compressing them, shearing them in any way. I could go into that more, but I realized I was doing it differently than I was taught, and started my practice 6 months after that in Boulder, Colorado. And that's, kind of long-winded story there, but I was absolutely convinced that I could help anyone, if I could help myself, even after my teachers gave up on me, if I could ask my best friend to step on me and we could figure it out, then I could help I could figure it out for other people too, or with them. I should say, because it's not for them. I don't do anything to anyone. It's a collaboration. And that's the short story of how I got here. I had a private practice in Boulder and then started on YouTube in 2015, and here we are.
That's a great story. I'm like, oh, this is super interesting. And I want to ask more. I want to ask more about this. And it's, first off, that's a great friendship.
Yes, it is.
When you can ask your friend to do these things and also move to Colorado with you, that's amazing.
Yeah, it is incredibly informative for everything I do. I always tear up a little bit when I think about it, but I've come to understand now, I didn't really at the time, that being in the presence of somebody who says, yes, I'll help you, and they have no attachment to your outcome. She just was like, sure, I'll try. I'll give it my best. And she wasn't afraid of my pain. And she wasn't afraid of making me worse. She didn't say, whoa, what if I like make your pain worse? There was no fear. It was just collaboration and partnership and trying things and experimenting. It was the greatest gift, and it taught me how to do the work. So, I feel like every person I work with now is an attempt to pay that forward, what she did for me. So
that's a lovely experience. I love that you use the word collaboration here, and you mention it throughout your story as well. And of course, I will let you introduce, particularly for our listeners who may not be familiar with what fascia is and why, of course, we bring this up when you did touch upon how it is related to trauma. But of course, we'll get into the details. But I love to sort of like start off this topic of what fascia is from this reference to collaboration that you say, because I'm not an expert in working with fascia, but I have done several practices where I experience it, and I resonate with what you say when it's like, I have been doing other physical practices for a long time, and it's like, why? Also, why is it happening with just like one movement, one thing, or one session? And I'm not saying you need one session. I have no idea, but it definitely opens up different possibilities in the body that we are usually used to. Like I even had like this idea of, oh, I'm feeling pain here, I have to stretch it, and then stretch the hell out of it, like literally, like I don't want to say harming the body, because that was, of course, never my intention, but it's very like coarse and very raw in a sense, this intention. And what I've seen people talk about fascia and how it actually makes the work is through this collaboration. It's not just working with the body, but as you were saying, it's a collaboration of the state that you're in while you're working with fascia. Am I on the right track? Yeah.
Yeah, absolutely. It gets really meta when we add another person, but if you can definitely work on yourself. So that's what I teach people on my YouTube channel a lot, and in some online courses that I teach. So fascia is the most abundant tissue in the body. It wraps every nerve ending, every blood vessel, every fibril of muscle tissue, and then fiber. It wraps our organs and our bones, and it's everywhere. It really gives us our shape and texture. And it's meant to be mostly water. I've come to learn it's supposed to be a fourth phase or structured water, actually, which is a little gel-like. And it's meant to basically be a shock absorption for us, if we're talking just physiological, where we can run down mountains and not feel the impact. And it doesn't, we have this assumption in the world that impact is bad for your joints, maybe, or that running downhill is bad for your knees. And it's not. It's only unhealthy if your fascia is unhealthy, and it can't absorb that shock of, pounding down a mountain. And I've also come to learn that in the fascia, it has its own memory bank separate from the brain, which I find fascinating. And it also has its own nerve receptors and nerve receptor network that communicates with itself outside the influence of the brain. And again, I just find this fascinating. So there's the nervous system and what the nervous system governs in the body. And the nervous system is the brain. So we could use those words interchangeably. But then there's this fascial system with its own memory bank and its own nerve receptor network. And some of those nerve receptors can communicate a signal of pain to us, or signal us to take certain actions or feel certain things. And fascia then responds to us, to our emotional state, to our nervous system, because there's a relationship there. So yeah, it really doesn't work to say, be angry at your body for giving you pain or for having unhealthy fascia and then try to beat it up. Like I really dislike, there are some people out there, who use the term smash your tissue. Like, we're going to do a calf smash, a quad smash. I really dislike that, because I don't want to smash my tissue. I want to collaborate with it to get healthy. So the number one thing that I use in my practice and then try to teach anyone looking to work on their own body is that fascia release itself is one of the most amazing diagnostics tools because fascia touches every other element in your body. So you can use fascia release to learn about your current nervous system state, your current state of fascia, which is different from your nervous system. What's in each system? You can learn about that. It may take time to discern between the two, but this is a learning curve. You can learn about how hydrated you are at a cellular level, your tissue level, right? You can learn about toxicity in the lymph system because the entire lymph system is housed in your fascia. So I see fascia work as a collaboration with the body, so between you and your body, or me and my body, and then between me and my psyche even, right? Because I believe that the psyche or the soul is really housed in our body. I mean, if we think about it, even though we think here with our brains, where is the mind really? Our brain is here, but where's the mind? I mean, it's everywhere. So is the brain. We just don't really think about it. We don't think about the fact that our guts are thinking right now, right? And our muscles and our fascia they're also having like thoughts, you could say, or a type of communication and consciousness. So we can tap into that communication network and then learn to work with it to, resolve pain, move trauma out of the body, out of the tissues, to regenerate and function optimally. So
as someone who's directly working with fascia, how would you describe what fascia is? Because I know from like a very functional level, it's like, something that's around your muscles. Mm-hmm. What's the role of fascia? Why is it there? What does it do? Is it something that's done for the muscles and your structure, or is it something that's part of an extension of a nervous system? And what would you say around that?
Well, there's probably a lot of opinions out there and maybe some controversy. I'll just share my theories, and I'm always learning. So, I may say this today and it may change a year from now. I
agree. I relate to that.
Yeah. At a very basic level, we could say fascia is the wrapping of things, right? So it wraps nerve endings, it wraps blood vessels, it wraps the organs, it's wrapping. However, the part of fascia that I'm the most fascinated by is what's inside that wrapping that connects every part of your body to all the other parts, and allows for communication. So even nerve signals travel through the fascial network, and fascia has its own nerve receptor network. So fascia is literally the place where your nervous system communicates through. Those nerve receptors travel through the fascial system. So it's not just the wrapping. There's like a communication highway inside the fascia. So there's this space inside the wrappings where all kinds of things are happening. Nerve signals are traveling between the body and brain and back again. Blood's circulating through its system. But then inside this fascial system, there are gels, there are nutrients, there's nutrients getting pulled into cells who need nutrition, and then waste is coming out of those cells into this part of the fascial system and then getting moved out of the body. So it's teeming with communication all the time and activity all the time. Whereas if you think about other parts of the body, they're their own system. So blood is just moving. Blood is inside the vessels and it's moving. You don't have nerve receptor networks traveling through blood, at least not to my knowledge, right? So it's really the fascial system where all of this communication and activity is happening. And that's what makes it so interesting to me.
And I see this when you speak of communication, of course, with the trauma lens that I usually bring to the podcast sessions. When I see this is a very direct pathway, as you said, it's like a highway of communication between the nervous system and what's happening in the body itself. Of course, it makes sense to see a connection between something that the body, that the brain or the nervous system in general is trying to communicate and do with the body, right? As you were saying, it's an active thing that's happening, like your nervous system, your body, your fascia, your body's actually always doing something, even when you don't recognize that. And in this communication, where do you see, or how have you come to understand the link between trauma that people might say, oh, it's something that happens in the brain because you understood something? Because just to clarify, that's not usually the way we describe it, right? But usually it's a stored memory. And then, of course, what we are now coming to understand is that they are related, right? But how is the fascia? What's the role in this communication between brain and body when we talk about trauma?
Yeah, we could spend hours just talking about this one thing. Yeah, I've really come to see that there is a distinct difference between how the brain or nervous system responds to traumatic events, and then how that impacts our body and our mind and our feelings, our thoughts. And then what's in the fascia? Because like I said, fascia has this communication network and memory bank outside the influence of the brain. And so just to give an example of what that might mean, it means that, your liver can talk to your heart without having to talk to the brain. Mm-hmm. Or, your feet and your legs can talk to your arms without having to talk to the brain.
Through fascia?
Mm-hmm. Okay. Yes. I believe. I haven't heard of any other way it would happen, but I'm open to being wrong. Yeah. So, normally we think about the brain regulating all communication, but that's, simply not true according to the research that I've been looking into over the last decade. So there's the memory bank of the brain, because, it has a memory bank as well. And then there's the memory bank in our fascia. And on some level, I guess this might seem kind of woo-woo, or this is just me theorizing based on my own personal experience and working with a lot of people. The brain isn't where the soul exists. And when I say soul, I'm equating it with psyche and soul. Psychology is all soul work to me. I don't really see the soul being synonymous with the brain. I see the brain and the nervous system really being the primal animal part of us whose sole job it is to keep us alive. That's it. So one thing I like saying a lot is that your brain would rather you be in pain than dead. So your brain doesn't really care about your soul. It cares that you're alive. And so the brain can actually manipulate us in all kinds of ways to keep us alive. And what this has meant for me in my journey, and for a lot of the people that I've worked with, is that my brain would rather I self-censor than speak my truth, because there was a time in my life when speaking my truth might have actually ended in death, literally. My brain would rather I, shrink my world, right? And just endure pain than speak about it or, do anything different than I learned to survive. So I look at the soul element, which I believe exists more in the fascia, the water element. So fascia is mostly water, is kind of the memory bank of the soul. Like there's a soul in here that wants self-expression. There's a soul, in you that has a truth. That's not my truth. It's yours, and a path in life that you want to walk, right? And I look at it like, yeah, there's the brain and survival, and then there's the soul and self-expression or self-ownership, autonomy. And they're two different things. And I think this distinction could help a lot of people, because personally, for me anyway, looking only at like nervous system regulation to heal trauma wasn't it for me. Like I actually had to learn to risk rejection and abandonment, and I had to be willing to feel unsafe to heal my trauma. So it's not just, they're both important, and understanding the role of the nervous system, and then how sometimes you might have to actually be willing to feel fearful and anxious and, all kinds of uncomfortable things to fulfill the longing in your soul. And I think that's the memory that exists in the fascia. And I also think that's partly why we get these pain signals from the body, because your body knows your soul. Your body remembers everything that's ever happened to you, including why you were born, why you decided to come into the world, or who you think you are, and it's trying to remind you all the time, hey, you're not going to be happy if you live a small existence for your whole life. So in a way of, I call myself a pain advocate because I believe that pain is trying to get our attention so that we can actually live a fulfilled life, and we can live a healthy life and a happy life.
One of the things that come to my mind when I hear you mention this is how culturally there is a need, I guess I can call it a need, to have everything look so pretty and perfect and polished and presentable. And pain usually goes through a channel in our interpretation that it's something that's supposed to be, you mentioned this at the beginning, it's supposed to be, hide it, don't talk about it, repress it, or actually manage it, right? And I'm quoting it because it's more like, oh yeah, you take this pill and then you forget all about it, right? Mm-hmm. With, of course, no discredit, not to discredit that we sometimes do not have awareness or choice around how to regulate pain, right? And sometimes I go into exercising too much or overworking or, bringing stuff into my body that may soften the feelings of that pain, right? Which are not necessarily helpful in the long run, but it's my attempt to ease that pain. But there's this boundary between a physical reaction to not feel pain versus I don't want to know about it. I have something, I go to somebody who will just take it away. And your invitation here from what I hear is to deepen into a curiosity of where that pain wants to take me, in a sense, right?
Yes. So I have I think it's an unpopular opinion, maybe. I don't know, or it's just a theory, again, that I don't really hear a lot of other people talking about. And it's a conversation I want to further. So thank you for allowing me to do that here. Which is that there's consensus in the trauma healing worlds and the emotional, the emotional regulation world and the psychology world, that feelings are meant to be felt, right? And expressed, and they're informative of our emotional and relational needs, right? Or the needs of our soul, you could say, right? Like I have a need to be, to say, speak my truth, to be myself, to be my full self without banishment, rejection, and that's going to happen, right? So that's part of understanding we live in a world where, as of yet, we don't all accept each other as we are, right? But by and large, there's this consensus that emotions are to be felt. And yet, but we don't really say that about pain, physical pain. So I have noticed there are so many memes and so many Instagram, little cute little posts or whatever that we can't grow without pain and we can't do that, but all of them are referring to emotional pain. When it comes to physical pain, people are like, oh no, like you probably need surgery, or, you need to get that looked at because there might be something really wrong with your body. And I'd like to propose that if it's true about emotions, it's true about sensations, that our body has tangible physical needs and it has no choice but to communicate through pain. The same with our emotions. Now, one thing I definitely know to be true is that they often get conflated, and we can confuse physical pain for emotional pain and emotional pain for physical pain, and emotions can manifest physically and physical pain can become emotional. And that's not something we talk about enough either, in my opinion. An injury can actually become traumatic for somebody who has a self-identity of being strong and capable, or maybe an athlete, right, in high school, but then they get injured and they have to give up the career they thought they were going to go after. And suddenly now what was just physical is now really emotional, because we're talking about someone's, self-identity and who they thought they were, or who they're, where they thought their life was going. So there's so much to explore in that connection between our sensations and our emotions, which together create feelings, and then learning to distinguish between them.
Yeah, and I guess there's also this cultural component of some cultures being more used to having access to things to soothe that pain. And then it would make sense to say, oh, it's not normal to feel pain and you can just fix it, right? And as you said, lots of marketing around fix it, you don't have to. And I've seen not just my own, but other cultures where there is a very different approach to knowing that pain is part of life. And just the fact that no way do I mean that it's a good thing, but the fact that you know that there is no incredible access to medical services, and I don't mean like really good standard, just actual access to health services, means that you get to see in many other countries that are not just first world countries, you see a lot of difficulties in people, like the uncle who has this condition, the grandma, which are more assumed as part of life. And of course, I will say this again, not to normalize that this is right, just to mention that this does create a different understanding of how to look at pain and how to look at illness, or how to not run away from that, just basically at the end of the day, right? Again, not in a sense to normalize, but as with emotions, and I hear you when you say that now it's more common to hear people say that, oh, it's okay to have these so-called negative emotions, but just the fact that you're saying that they're negative says so much already, right?
Yeah.
And but that's just actually also very relatively recent, and even lots of people who start speaking of allowing ourselves to feel everything. Once you're there, because I've been in lots of sessions where once you're there, it's like, no, you shouldn't be feeling that, or we should fix your sadness, we should fix your anger towards, your mother is wrong, even when there's a story of trauma, of abuse. So this, usually the way that I frame my work is, we don't want to be in a constant state of anger, but allowing anger to come when it's normal to express it. If somebody is trespassing a boundary, your body needs to be able to react to that. And it's usually to anger. What you do with that reaction, that's another different story. But the access to the activation, it's healthy to be able to access that. And as I'm hearing you, how this translates on physical pain, like if I'm running and I hit my knee, with the chair, which happens constantly, it's normal that there's pain and a reaction to that, right? And this is sort of like in a momentary example, but also, as you were saying, when your body's super armored, and I would love to get into a little bit of this if you are willing. In your story, you're sharing this example of how your body gets armored with trauma and your fascia gets hardened. And I don't know, does it get thicker as well?
It can, not for everybody, but for me, that's what happened. Yeah.
And how this is going to affect, let's say, how you feel your knees, if you're able to jump or run or whatever. And it's not necessarily that there's something wrong with you, but it's a normal response. Not to say that, yes, we welcome pain all of the time, but it makes sense that there's pain when the condition is present, right?
Yes. Yeah. My entire philosophy is that before trying to, quote, fix something or ease pain or really do anything, take any action if you're in pain, it's useful to understand what's going on first. Right?
It's funny that we have to say these kinds of things, right?
I know. Yep. Yeah. But, it's reflexive. And most of us do this. I mean, I'm still prone to it sometimes. Yeah. I don't like the way I'm feeling today. How can I feel better? Why? Because I have a lot of work to do. It's really inconvenient to have a stomach ache or, anxiety or whatever is going on. Right. But if we actually are willing to pause and look, do some kind of self-inquiry or maybe a physical inquiry. This is why I love fascia release. And with enough of this practice, you can actually interpret your own sensations and feelings quite quickly, right? You'll know you have a database that you can draw from, but it does take work to build up. Then you can respond appropriately to the appropriate sensation, right? So, I mean, I could give you an example of, me. I experienced sexual violation for 2.5 years from 13 to 15 and a half by a next door neighbor. So that's a huge part of my trauma. I was also dropped off by my mom at a friend's house when I was 10 or 11. I forgot which year it was, for about 4 or 5 months, and I didn't know when she was going to pick me up. So there was abandonment before I was targeted. So there was a lot of emotional stuff going on, and I didn't believe I could tell anyone what was going on. I didn't think I could trust my mom because when, if she dropped me off, is she really going to be, there for me? So that's when I learned to endure pain. I remember when I was 10 or 11 at my friend's house, I injured my knee, my left knee, ironically, right? So this is really where things get really fascinating to me. It was the first major injury. I scraped my knee really bad. Blood's squirting out of my knee. My friend's freaking out. Her mom's freaking out. And I wasn't feeling anything. I was completely numb to it. I was almost laughing, why are you guys freaking out? And it took me literally until 40 years old to unpack that memory and go, it's not normal, healthy that I didn't feel anything. That's scary. But I learned then to react to every future pain in the same exact way. Now, at the same time, what was happening in my soul, so we're talking, there's physical, there's emotional, is that I was developing the belief through my teenage years and into my 20s that there must be something really wrong with me, that I must be defective. Not only do I have all this physical pain that I didn't understand at the time, but I hated myself, and I didn't know how to have healthy friendships or healthy relationships. And I was drawn to the quote wrong men. And it was just this pernicious, persistent belief. I must be broken. I must be defective. There must be something really wrong with me. And then when my knees started hurting at age 17, guess what? That belief started settling in even more. Oh my God, I can't even run without pain. I must be so defective. I'm the only 17-year-old I know that can't run, And then it just kept going, right? So I psychologically was susceptible to the belief that something's wrong with me. My body must be defective. I must be defective. And yet maybe all that was happening with my left knee, I'm just saying maybe I had poor running form, or my left glute wasn't firing, or I leaned on my left leg a lot, or because of the trauma, my fascia is getting thicker and it just can't bounce me out of that running, right? So there's physical things that are happening that are objectively true. And then there's how we react to what's happening. And a lot of us react emotionally to pain, right? Because it's scary, especially when we don't understand why it's happening. But our reaction to pain creates more of it. So this is why, I say I'm a pain advocate. So something's getting your attention. Let's figure out what it is and what's the soul element. What's your fear? Because more than likely, it has nothing to do with the pain itself. Why was I so afraid of being broken and defective? Well, because if it's true that I'm broken and defective, and there's something so wrong with me that I'm going to be in pain for the rest of my life and never have a good relationship and always be in abusive relationships, why not just kill myself? That thought was going through my mind. And there wasn't anything wrong with me. I had trauma. I had to heal my psyche. I had to heal my soul. And then I had to help my body, because my body was perfectly capable of running and hiking. But it had learned when I was neuroplastic from being a child up to 25, we're neuroplastic. It learned certain patterns and it memorized them. We can literally memorize pain, and then your brain just repeats it. So I don't even remember what your question was, but
well, this relationship to how pain can, well, that this is one of the last things that I was very interested in that you mentioned, how pain can be different for people depending on how you relate to it, right?
Yes. Mm-hmm. Yeah, exactly. Yeah. And it's really at the heart of everything. I mean, why was I so afraid of knee pain? Right. Well, the absolute worst emotional state for me at that point in my life was feeling helpless. Why? Because that's how I felt when my mom dropped me off at my friend's house, and suddenly I'm in a new house and there are weird, bad things happening in that house. And, they're telling me I eat too much, and that's where I learned to eat for comfort. But then I feel ashamed of it. And it's, gosh. So, there's just so much going on psychologically, and then we project that onto our bodies and we take it with us. But I wasn't afraid of the knee pain. I was afraid of the feeling of helplessness. And this is true for so many people.
Yeah. Sometimes I have seen situations where pain actually makes me feel alive. And I am not willing to let that go, right? Because if it's a connection to life, we cannot go and, let's soothe you. Let's take that edge of your nervous system away, when that's sort of like a way that the person is feeling connected or linked to the sensation of being alive.
Yeah, that's super interesting. I mean, I think that there are so many different patterns that we can have. Like, some people might perpetuate pain because it's the way they get connection or touch, right? Or like you mentioned, maybe you feel alive, or, I relate to that, I think, in a different way. Like, if I'm not jumping off of cliffs in my life and doing really scary things, something feels wrong. Yeah. But that, that's been happening in my life since I was a kid. So we seek out familiar feelings, states, experiences.
Yeah, familiar feelings, right? Sometimes I see how people think like, I am a mess. I repeat these weird patterns. I see myself falling into toxic patterns, relationships, whatever. But then it's sometimes as simple as finding that thread, right? Because at the end of the day, if we were like, oh yeah, it's a neuroscientific way of understanding that what you're doing is actually just like a pathway that you learn. And yeah, for example, it's very also common, like these toxic relationships, right? Quote unquote. And it is very true that for some people, I wouldn't say that in all cases that's what's happening, but people learn that after your body feels the pain of, let's say, disconnection, or the fear of losing someone, or the pain of being insulted by someone, or something like that, your body goes into a high threshold of pain, and then your body will generate soothing hormones. And if I do not know how to find those places of going down to soothing and peace and safety, I will use that. My brain is going to use that as a way to get there. And that's what it creates as a cycle of addiction, even in relationships, sort of like an emotional addiction. What's the addiction? It's the inability to find those states and access those states on my own without having to go through that cycle. Yeah.
Yes, absolutely. I think the number one skill any of us need, to do this work for ourselves or anyone else, right? If you're in a professional field where you're helping people with pain or trauma, in my opinion, is pattern recognition, recognizing these patterns. Because like you said, there's a thread. It runs through everything. There's a pattern. So if you can identify the pattern and become conscious of it, then you have more choice. And then you can choose to, maybe you choose to, say, hey, I like being this way, but you do it consciously instead of it just being an automated behavior, right?
And as you expressed, right? Sorry.
Oh, no, go ahead.
Right at the beginning of your story, just that moment when you started journaling and come to this place of, oh, this is it for me right now. And your whole body relaxes and you have this connection. It's the power of accessing truth is huge.
Huge.
And we could talk about it from like very poetical, spiritual understanding of the ultimate nature or of whatever, or we could go as simple as to say I mean, lots of methods use this. Any change comes with awareness first.
Yes. Yep. Yeah, I would agree. And yeah, truth is often scary. It's inconvenient. It's the thing we don't want to look at. And in my experience, and we're only ready when we're ready. And every person's timing is different, right? But once you're ready, it will feel relaxing. It will feel light. You'll feel lighter. Like that's been my experience. Like to finally admit the truth or to finally see what's been trying to get your attention. That's been a guiding light for me ever since writing that, in my journal.
I love what you say about being ready and there being a time when you're ready. And sometimes it's a matter of deciding, sometimes it's not, and sometimes it's a matter of building other things around. And this is one of the ways that I approach trauma work. And this is, I think, one of the core things that I use. We cannot pull a person out of a trauma response if the person has not developed an alternative to that. Because usually a trauma response is a way to defend themselves, to bring themselves to safety. As you said, through pulling away or through hardening. Both are ways to help myself cope with the reality that I am witnessing. And until the person, even if that situation is over, because trauma does not recognize time. So is still being processed in the body. But until we do not trust that we have the resources available to know that we can do something differently, it's very hard to take away that shield, because that's sort of what's keeping you guarded from something that seemed like a huge threat at the moment, right?
Totally. And this, our bodies are amazing. They're so amazing. It is amazing to me. Like we are so intelligent. I mean, when I look at my own story, for so many years, I would just beat myself up in my mind and in my journaling about the choices I made. Why didn't I go get help? Why didn't I tell anyone? Why did I let this happen to me? Why didn't I say no? I'm so weak. I'm so this. I'm so, and actually now looking back, I'm like, oh my God, I did the absolute most intelligent thing. Why? Because if I had told like my family, they're not horrible people. They were neglectful, and I don't need to get into that, but they couldn't have been available to me in the right way. And if I had told my parents what was happening to me with our neighbor, I very well might have become the laughingstock of my school. I might have been called a whore or a slut by boys. I don't know. I might have been dragged into a court case that, might have become, I don't know. I have no idea. I just know now it was so intelligent what I did. And I've come to see actually that this wisdom comes from the soul, in my opinion, because it preserved the integrity of my soul. If I hadn't made those the exact choices I did, the most core value part of me, the part of me that values certain things, would have been violated in a totally different way. That would have been an even worse trauma than the one I went through. Yeah. So we are just, and our bodies they do amazing things for us, and it is painful sometimes. Like you can end up with a lot of physical pain from these traumatic experiences and the way you had to, the choices you made that were wise, right? But that it's the price of survival in a way, so survival is important. And then learning to honor honor your body for what it did for you and honor the choices you made that were really intelligent. I just think this is so important for healing both the body and the soul or the psyche.
Yeah, as you said at the beginning, the body, when the body's trying to survive, it doesn't care if it's gonna get you in pain, for the rest of your life until you do something maybe to change that. But it doesn't care. It's like we get through it. And I speak of this often from a family constellations perspective, but it wasn't until I saw a picture that I was like, this is what I really need to transmit to people when you think of the survival mechanisms in the body. And it was a picture of a flooding that was happening somewhere. It was a long time ago, so I don't remember exactly where. And it was a family that was being swept by a river. But the father was tall enough, large enough to be, half of his body was out of the water. The mother was hanging from a tree somewhere, and she was able to stay, somewhere close to the tree. And the father was taking care of a little child, of a daughter. And he was holding her high, and he was holding her from like her shoulder, but it seemed like it was a very painful way of holding her because she was like hanging from the other side of the body. And when we don't have this full picture, as I am describing this picture from an adult vision, we're able to see what was happening, what was needed, and the best of, we actually use this phrase a lot in Spanish, right? The best, sort of like the best of the worst or something, right? Out of the terrible conditions, which one's the less worse? Yeah. Words. And as kids, we can also understand how for that child, she doesn't have the ability to understand the scope of everything that's happening around her. And she might just remember, like my shoulder got dislocated and it might hurt for, the rest of her life even. And even sometimes if she gets the story, she might be able to get an understanding in this case. But in general, we are not aware of that transaction, right? Safety versus the conditions that are not great. Because as you shared with the story, of course, these things happen. Of course, there are neglectful families that do end up getting into they add a new layer of trauma that once you come into a place where you have to deal with it, you deal with the trauma that happened with the first situation. And then we have to deal with another layer of how that was handled by people around, if it was handled in the greatest way. And sometimes this layer has different layers. So it's really what was best at your access at that moment. And it's not so easy to understand. But once you get in touch, as you said, with this intelligence of the body, it's a very, very healing moment.
Yes, I think it's something that's a huge missing piece in the trauma healing world. We're getting there, but it's still not common knowledge that you can end up in a lot of pain from emotional trauma. And that there are, and because of that, it's not just in your brain. It's not just the pain is from the trauma. Your body literally had to adapt physiologically. And it's the adaptations actually that can cause pain. But it's not your body annoying you or trying to hurt you. Your body's had to adapt. It had no choice, just like you had no choice. It did the best it could. It made the best decision. You made the best decision. So when we can honor both those aspects, right, then we can help the body. We can help ourselves and we can help the body. Because the truth is, bodies are amazing at regenerating. We can regenerate from even the most serious acute injuries, even the most debilitating traumas that created it, like in me, thick fascia and, walls of armor. We can soften it. We can break it up. We can open ourselves up. We can change physiologically, just like we can change at a soul level or a consciousness level.
And regain this mobility that we assume that, it's not going to happen for me, but it's actually,
Yeah.
One of the things that I have personally experienced through fascia work, and I know some other people who have experienced it on a first-hand level, it really responds so beautifully, right? So I guess when it's done right, you might say, right? But it has a very sensitive response, and it's I don't want to say that it's a quick solution. I wouldn't dare say anything of a method that I talk about, but
well, it can be, right? So it's on a spectrum. It can happen really fast.
Yeah.
Like I've worked with a lot of people in my private practice that get out of pain in one session.
Yeah, I have.
And they may have, I mean, they may have been in pain for years.
Yeah. Yeah, I have been dealing with something that my body naturally takes tension in a certain spot. And I'm very used to having regular massage to take care of that. But then I was also, because of the pandemic, actually using some fascia work to deal with that, because I wasn't going through my regular massage. And I'm like, what? Like, this is much better and much more long lasting. And it felt, this is my words, but sort of like it felt deeper. Not as, and I know massages are not superficial, but it wasn't sort of like a quick superficial solution. It felt like I was integrating different levels of mobility back to my body. So yeah, that's sort of like how I can express it.
Yeah, I guess an important distinction, just for anyone listening, if you've never experienced the kind of fascia work I'm talking about, there are plenty of massage therapists who call themselves fascia body workers or myofascial release therapists. And I personally have never experienced someone doing something to my body, no matter how skilled they are, that can create the kind of lasting change that's possible when you do fascia release the way I'm describing it. And I love getting massages. So this is not a knock on massage therapists, but it's getting the fascia to move itself, to release itself. So it's self-initiated movement under compression. So whether you're, using a foam roller or balls at home or coming into my office, I would be stepping on you. So I might be stepping on your calves or your quads or your IT bands, and then you move. So by you moving your body, that is what creates the lasting change, in my opinion, because we're not only recruiting the fascia to change itself, we're recruiting the brain to create new neural pathways. We're creating all those, the nociceptors, the neuroceptors, the proprioceptors, the interoceptors, all those nerve signals are involved in movement, right? And in what we're doing when we're actually taking action instead of just receiving something. So, I think it's metaphorical, right? Like no one can change me but me, right? And it's true in the body, just like it's true in the rest of life. So you can't go on a diet for me, right? We can help each other. We can assist each other. We can guide. We can, I can hug you and that can feel great. We can get other needs met. But I think it's important to know, like I love getting massages because they feel amazing and it's good for the nervous system, for relaxation. But if I want to create change in my body, if I want to regenerate tissues, if I want to address pain specifically, I'm going to choose fascia release.
Yeah. Of course. Also, I want to make that clarification for all of massage practitioners.
Right.
I mean, once we were able to get a little bit of more mobility, I was able to go back. And as you said, like it's what you need for different needs and being able to know what it is for that. It was referring to one particular thing that happens that my body does. But of course, I have other needs as well through my body that I cater to different.
I don't know if you've ever thought about this, but this is me nerding out on all of this, but
Sure.
You could be in pain for reasons that have to do with not feeling seen or met by other humans. And if that happens in a massage, and that's the root cause of your particular pain, you could walk out pain-free. But it doesn't mean your tissues were changed in a specific way, right? But this is why pain is so fascinating to me, because it is in the brain and it's in the fascia, and it can happen for all kinds of reasons: psychological, emotional, relational, and physical. So
that's so true. And sometimes people say like, oh, this worked for me just for the fact that I was able to get away from my kids for, like 30 minutes.
So totally. Yeah. Yep.
Mm-hmm. That's wonderful. And if I do want to get close to your physical practice and actually get work done, where are you based, or where can people find you?
Well, currently I live in Oceanside, California. I only work with clients on kind of a case-by-case basis because I'm pretty busy teaching. I am actually, as of this recording, while we're recording this, I'm in the middle of a rebrand. So you can look up my YouTube channel, but I haven't posted new content in a little while, just while I'm working on this rebrand. But there are a ton of videos there for self-fascia release and self-healing. It's Elisha Celeste is the name of the YouTube channel, Elisha Celeste. And then there's going to be a new website coming soon, elishaceleste.com. That would have the information of how to work with me if anyone wants to do one-on-one. And then I'm teaching kinetics. So right now I'm working on creating an online academy, actually, to teach people who want to learn it virtually, because I have people that want to learn it all over the world. And then I'll be doing in-person workshops as well, because, you know, it's a lot better to learn something like this in person. Yeah. But there is so much demand, you know, especially through the pandemic, to learn something online. So I'm creating both.
Wonderful. This has been a super rich conversation. I have enjoyed so much talking to you.
Yeah, and thanks for having me on.
I think we could keep talking for a lot longer, for sure. So first off, thank you for accepting our invitation to the podcast. And I would love to close by closing thoughts, or maybe sometimes I like to ask, what works?
What works? What works? That's an interesting question. I think the only thing that really works for any of us, because we're all individual, is to stop thinking you can do what other people are doing, or do a cookie cutter, you know, program, or kind of hack your way to healing in a way, like one-off pain relief solutions, for example. What works is getting to know yourself. What works is getting to know your body, what you're made of, you know, what kinds of tissues you have inside of you, why pain happens, why it goes away. You know, getting to know, like I said, your feelings, your emotions, your sensations, learning to distinguish between the two so you can actually meet the needs of your body and your soul. So I think that's really the only thing that works for what we're talking about, is self-awareness, self-knowledge, getting to know yourself so you can meet your needs and thrive.
That's amazing. That's absolutely. And I agree with there's no clear-cut, just one version of things that should be fitting for everyone. And this invitation of getting to know you. And if it's on a path to finding a healing of physical pain, you'll be surprised at what other things you'll find about yourself, right?
Yes, including those superpowers, because we have superpowers waiting for us when we do this work.
Wonderful. Thank you so much, Elisha.
Yeah, thank you.
Mark Walsh here. If you like that, you'll probably like embodimentunlimited.com and our app. So on both of these things, you can get a bunch of podcasts that aren't available here, some exclusive ones with some big names, some people you'll probably recognize that are over there. There's a copy of my book, PDF of my first book on embodiment, which seems to people like. I sold quite a few copies on Amazon, but there's a free copy there. What else is there? Loads of videos of me coaching embodiment, resources on trauma, on meditation, on yoga. And you can also chat to people without going on Facebook or any of that nonsense. So if you want to chat embodiment with people, that's there. And it's on the embodimentunlimited.com, all free, and the app available at the App Store and all that good stuff. So if you like this, do check those out.